Good evening, everybody. If you're watching at home, sorry.
All right.
Thank you for your patience. We've been experiencing some technical difficulties, so thank you for hanging in there if you're watching at home. Do we have participants on the Zoom? Have you?
That's a good question.
Yes.
2 attendees.
Okay. All right. Thanks for your patience. So I'll call our meeting to order. 14, the school PM, the school committee meeting for September 18th, 2024. And we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so first thing we'll do is approve our agenda for tonight. I just want to acknowledge one oversight, which was that we did not have a facilities advisory committee report on this evening's agenda, but we should have because that committee did meet. However, since it was not included on our agenda for tonight, but there are some updates for the full school committee. Anna is, thank you, going to send an email to the full school committee to share those updates for us. If we read that and have questions, you can just reply directly to Anna. Just, be sure not to copy other school committee members on that. And we'll go from there. I'm sorry for that mistake.
No worries.
But thank you so much for being willing to provide the updates in writing that way. The other change that I'm aware of is proposing that we would move up the Glover PTO application for community preservation funding. That is under the chair's report for this evening. We have a couple members of the Glover PTO who have joined in case we have questions. So thank you both so much. Online and in person for being here. I think we'll just move that right up after public comment before the superintendent's report. Are there any other changes or deletions from the agenda that anyone knows about? Okay, great. So then we can approve our agenda that way and move on to public comment, which is the meeting where we welcome members of the community to come and share their perspectives with us. I don't see anyone in the audience here for public comment. Is there anyone online who would like to participate? If so, can you raise your hand, please? Okay, don't see anybody raising their hand, so we will move on from public comment into consideration of the school committee's letter in support of the Glover PTO application for community preservation funding. This request was brought to us by members of the Glover PTO, and I just want to really thank you, Bao. Bao sort of right away volunteered to help out by drafting the letter for us to consider, a letter that we could send on behalf of the school committee. So thank you so much for
You're welcome.
volunteering to do that. And do you want to just sort of introduce it anyway, or we have it in our folder to look at? So now's our chance to kind of ask leaders and or Peter or Katie. I don't know if you have any other thoughts on this. We saw your letter attached within the application that was shared with us. I know that the only question I had wondered about upon receiving the request was just, where this fits in the context of our efforts to make sure that all of our schools are receiving like equitable resources, you know, from the district, and including like support from an entity like this. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that piece, but
Yeah,
otherwise we can just jump into the letter itself.
I mean, we started talking last year, kind of in the second half of the year, about a project, and we initially started that conversation with MFE. It was kind of the genesis for really kind of like starting to put that into more of a formalized structure and thinking about over a period of 5 years, how could we create a project where, you know, the community could really, you know, kind of support the development of kind of open space, green space, outdoor learning space in all 6 of our schools. Mm-hmm. We had initially at the beginning of last year, when Chris was in his position as director of facilities, we had talked about playgrounds, and that was kind of an area of focus, I think, for a lot of schools, and a lot of PTOs have done a lot of work on playgrounds over the years. So Tom and I, and Katie hasn't been brought into this conversation this year yet because we have been kind of working on getting the year going, but our plan is to work with someone, and we're not yet sure how that will happen, but we want to work with someone to create some kind of initial design and assessment of what we might need, and to give us a sense of kind of both what's the total price tag for all 6 schools. There's probably a potential to have a process that engages students and faculty and community in that, and parents in that process as well. And so to look at both kind of the cost of it, design, and then also in terms of the equity question, you know, where do we need to invest first, or where are there kind of bigger gaps or more significant needs, whether that's at the middle school, elementary school, high school. So that's kind of where that work is.
Okay. But in light of that, this is a need now, and there is this
helpful. This is a helpful investment in as we look at, you know,
what needs to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, I agree. I think, you know, as we talked about last year, trying to tackle all the schools from like a master plan perspective, and not just allow for folks that have more time, knowledge, resources to kind of like experience across sites. I think it's fantastic that the PTO has already taken on this with the planting of some tree. We do our little bike ride and go over to Glover. It's always wet, even if it hasn't rained. So definitely, I think this is something that will support not but just Glover, but also kind of the broader town community as folks look for kind of space access. So I think all that's great, but I do think we, in coordination with this, or in addition to this, right, make sure we are crafting kind of a master plan of how we look, and I'm specifically thinking of like Tucker, and that is, as we talked about issues of heat, right, that is all asphalt, and so that is a very hot area that we're having our kids be on, and like how can we, they have some nice trees and things there, but how can we kind of improve that space especially? Yep. And then Cunningham, Collicott, again, they have the nice green area that has some pretty good shade, but their play areas, their main play area between the buildings, no shade. They just bake. So there's just those differences and more work that could be done. But I think within any of that, partnering with the CPC, as again we talked about a little bit last year, is a great idea. It's a great leverage. So I'm very happy the PTO at Glover thought of it and has pushed this forward.
You wrote a beautiful letter, Bao.
Oh, thank you.
Very nice.
I borrowed a lot of the language from the email we got from the video and added my little twist. So I hope you like it.
I guess one thing, and it might be in the proposal, so I don't know if this is a question for her or not, but just watering, like ensuring that the trees don't die. I planted trees at my own place, and like we didn't have irrigation in the right spots, and then like yeah, they turned brown, and it's like very upset. But just making sure
So
we have either the irrigation in site or we have the capacity within the, I don't know if that's consolidated facility staff or not, to fill the kind of, the bags that will be around the stakes on the trees and ensure that, at least for that first year, that they get a ton of water to take root.
the ducks are going to be carrying the water on their backs.
Yeah, I just naming that of like ensuring we have a watering plan.
I think that's a really good point.
Tom
'cause
has
it's
looked
been
at it.
a lot of,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Tom has signed off on this and feels confident that that will be taken care of, either, I don't know how, but either by him or nature or a combination of that.
I make a motion to approve the school committee letter of support for the Glover PTO's application for Community Preservation Act funding.
Second?
Why?
All in favor? Okay.
yes.
Great. So I think the next steps would be to get this letter as approved on letterhead. We can ask Charlene about that.
Yep.
And then we'll send it to you. So thank you so much for reaching out and for your leadership on this project. And good luck with your application,
There you go.
which is a really strong application. So
For sure.
thank
Thank
you
y'all
for
very much.
letting us
Yeah.
support it.
Of course.
Yeah, please keep us posted.
Yeah.
Yeah,
For sure.
yeah. So yeah, we'll email it. We'll email it to you. I know your deadline is Friday.
The deadline is the 27th, and so anytime before that's fine. We can get it easily. It's an electronic application.
Okay. Well, we should be able to get it back to you by the end of this week, I would say.
Oh, yeah.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Should we use this as here?
I think it's just Milton School Committee
Oh.
is okay, right? Yeah. I think so. Okay. So now it's superintendent's
Update.
report.
Okay. So I don't want to steal too much thunder from Mark, but I did want to mention MSBA visit yesterday, because that's right in my mind. It was the first thing I thought about. We did have a great visit, and I think we left that meeting. So MSBA came to go walk through Collicott and Cunningham.
For people who are listening who does not know what MSBA is, would you please stay with it?
Massachusetts School Building Authority.
Thank you.
And we've applied many years. The School Building Authority provides funding for school construction. We, in 2020, got to the place we are now. So this is a good sign that they came to visit. We are one of, I think, 28 schools that they are looking at right now.
Okay.
They don't know exactly how many they will fund, but a rough number would be half of those will potentially get the nod to enter into that feasibility period, which is the kind of like you enter into the process. Our principals did a great job of showing off their schools and sharing kind of some of the challenges that staff and students face in different ways. So that, I think that was really helpful. And yeah, it was exciting to have some kind of forward momentum on that. And I'll allow Mark to share more of the specifics. That's all I'm going to say on that. Was just at Collicott Open House. Open houses are happening right now. It's really exciting to be in schools and see elementary parents coming in, high school parents who kind of know the routine and the drills and things like that. and just great to see our community coming together. We are, in terms of our action teams, so I mentioned in my last presentation that when I went over our action plan for this year, that the work is going to be done through smaller groups, which are then kind of working out to staff and community, then coming back and leading this work. So I last week sent out an email to all staff to apply, and that closes on Friday. So once we get all of those different applications, we're figuring out too, between our principals, assistant principals, and directors of curriculum, who is going to be on kind of which group and how that will look. It's easy when the kind of the hum of the year starts, and you were mentioning, Val, that it feels busy, like a busy week, and I think my sense, and Kate's smiling too, like it's very busy, and it's really easy to just kind of like get stuck in doing all the busy stuff and not like slow down and be like, well, we actually have to build these systems. So that is definitely something that I'll talk about that when I'm talking about my goals later on. That's something that I'm really focused on, being the one to keep all of us focused on this, in spite of the fact that we've got 1,000 things going on and lots of smaller things to problem solve.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it can feel that when we are working on some of the smaller things that we're doing some of this work, but this work is different than problem solving like an issue that came up. So I'm very excited to get these teams off the ground. We're meeting next week with our principals, which is the DLT group. It's Central Office and Principals, and then with our CLT group, which is our 30 leaders, our directors, APs, principals, that larger group, on Thursday. And so after Thursday, we'll hopefully be kind of finished with the process of identifying who's on which teams, and we'll just get moving on those. So I'm excited to come back to you all and share updates and progress. We have those formalized quarterly reports that we're doing, but I'll be sharing periodically, and probably some of the action team leads will come in and share as well through the course of the year as we dig in and move forward. Tomorrow is our first half day, which is a big deal on our side because we've spent a lot of time retooling professional learning this year. And I think we've got a really good design. It's focused on making meaningful decisions around data, and it's happening in all of our schools. It's tailored to each building. We looked at trying to bring all of our staff together, but with the time constraints that we have in a half day, it's pretty hard to with all the kind of different times that people are available. Tucker's out later, Cunningham's out earlier, so it's hard to match up the time for that. So we felt like it was easier to do in building. We will be obviously on November 3rd. We'll have everybody together here, and that'll be an opportunity to do district-wide work.
November 5th.
5th, sorry. I think 3rd was maybe last year. So we, and one of the things that is important with that intentionality around professional learning is just having everybody have real clarity around what we're doing and why we're doing it. And I think this is something that's been challenging here for a long time, not just last year, but for a long time. So this is exciting. I think it's kind of one of those immediate impact type of things where I think staff are going to feel like, okay, every professional learning opportunity doesn't always hit you in the way that you feel like this is the best thing ever. But if it's organized and clear and there's an understanding of the vision, I know for me, on the receiving end of professional learning, it feels much better and I'm more engaged, and we really want that engagement from everyone. So that's another thing that I'm excited about this week. And finally, we are, Bao and I met and talked about student representatives, and we're going to be starting to meet with them soon, which
Yep.
is exciting. We talked about, and feel free to join me on this, Bao, but we talked about having them focus on some different areas as they did with the calendar, which is something that they're going to continue to work on this year as we work on putting together that committee. We're going to, when we meet with them first, we're going to have a conversation about that and then talk about bringing some kind of representative group together that we talked about last spring or winter when we were looking at calendar to continue that conversation and really have student voice be central. I think that's something they're going to be excited about. We also talked about having them work on budget and kind of like connecting with students around budget, I think would be fun. Another thing that we've been focused on that is, I think, really important to get student perspective on and leadership on is cell phone policy. You've probably seen that increasingly school districts are adapting new policies. It's probably over the last year, like it's like exponential growth in cell phone policy and reaction to cell phones and social media. We talked about this as a leadership team this summer and looked at different policies, and we're in the process of looking at refining ours and decided as a leadership team that we wanted to engage before we go forward with a new policy, that we wanted to engage students and community at large in a conversation about that before we just go ahead and move in whatever direction we decide. So we want to make, I think the student representatives could be really helpful and central to that as well.
We also talk about how we can survey our alums to see, to get their opinions about how the experience was like after graduation from our schools, and what works for them and what might be lacking from the education at MPS. So we can make our system better for our future students.
Yeah, so we're excited to meet with them. That's happening
Next Friday.
Next Friday. Yeah. Yeah. Do you want me to go right into my goals, or?
Does anyone have questions about any of that or any other back to school stuff?
No.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay. So the goals are pretty simple this year in some ways, because as I looked at our district improvement goals, I'm just kind of starting on the bottom here, on the district goals 1, 2, and 3, are a copy of the implementation plan, strategic priorities. I felt like that is going to be my focus at the district level, is that work, and so I feel like for me, keeping that as my district improvement goals, which we identified through a year of analysis of the school district, made total sense. So there's no new language there. That's directly from the implementation plan. Student learning goal. So last year, we purchased Performance Matters, which is a data dashboard that connects to PowerSchool. And we have not used it or really necessarily like maximized it or populated it in the way that I think it can be used. And we certainly haven't worked together as a leadership team to determine how to be utilizing data in our decision making. It's something that I think is as I've, in my kind of year and a half here of kind of seeing how things operate, I think it's an area that we need to focus on more, especially if we're going to be really tackling the opportunity gap. Our leaders have to be like at their fingertips, have to have knowledge of the data that is telling us how we're doing, and they need to understand when they're looking at that data what does it mean and what do I do about it? And this is part of the move that I'm doing to really, and all our principals are excited about moving in this direction of making our principals more instructional leaders, and not so much focus on just operations. So I thought, as I thought about a student learning goal, I could have gotten more micro, but I really think this is a key move and an important one, and it connects to all the other work that we're doing. So if you read through academic excellence and the implementation plan and our work in MTSS, building an instructional framework, this is going to be key. Professional practice goal is really, and Katie can attest to this because she was in a meeting this morning where we were talking about this, of bringing coherence to our leadership team and efficiencies and clarity and coherence. We've made some progress in this area, and it was a focus for me last year as well, but we have a lot further to go, both in terms of refining kind of where we are and helping people to break out of kind of cycles they've been in for a long time, which is just kind of the way it is when you're in an organization for a long time. So I see this work in terms of professional practice goal as being explicit, as opposed to problem solving when a communication error happens between, what we talked about this morning, for example, was an issue where an issue arose and different leaders took different pieces of it, but weren't necessarily communicating together. And so it was like there was information in a lot of areas, and it needed to be, someone needed to come in and say, I'm taking charge of this. I mean, not like I'm taking charge of it, but here's what I see. Here are the steps we need to take, and let's make sure, the big piece was, let's make sure everyone who's connected to this issue is understanding what the issue is, and they're all communicating together. And so we are talking. I'm bringing this to our. This goal is kind of manifesting in terms of work I'm doing with both the DLT and CLT groups, and creating structures with them. Not just saying we need to do better, but actually creating structures so that we don't have these kinds of drops and gaps sometimes that slow us down to make us feel busier than sometimes we have to be. Anything to add to that?
No.
Okay.
I agree.
Okay.
Do you guys have the policy similar to us that, like, if one of us have an email sent out, you cannot reply all? You don't have that policy, right? You can reply all, right?
Yeah.
That's just open meeting law on elected officials.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's,
But we try not to do a lot of reply all because, like an email string with lots of reply alls, stuff gets lost as you go down, and then you're like, okay, who said what, when, and where is that?
I see.
Yeah.
A couple. I mean, I don't disagree with any of these things. I guess my one pushback would be like, this is a lot of things you have listed, which is, again, better than the alternative, certainly. But I know, like, there's a saying of, if you have more than 5 goals, you have no goals. And, like, although this is kind of 5, you got 4 within each one. And a lot of these are really big, too.
Yeah.
And so I just want to name that of, like, when I look at this, I worry about capacity, like you're all these things need to happen, but also as it relates to, like, when we come back from, like, the evaluation perspective at the end, like evaluating on each of these and holding you to each of these and saying, like, oh, you accomplished one of these, but not, like, if you accomplish half of this stuff in a year, that is incredible progress. And so I want to name that, first of all, that was one of my thoughts when I first read it. The other was around the, like, instructional framework. I know that's a big part of the like academic alignment piece that you've launched on the PD Day with staff, of like creating that so you'll have a shared sense of like what is high quality instruction, and then that being the guiding principle from moving forward of curriculum improvements and professional development, learning communities and things like that. Is your sense that instructional framework development work would be done within our evaluation window, which is like
April.
what? Yeah, by April. Is that?
Probably not by April,
Yeah.
but I could have said work towards implementation of in the goals. I just used the language, but I'm not expecting, like when I say in these 3 goals, what I'm kind of holding myself to and what I'll report on is the development of all of these things. So it's overwhelming if I was doing all these, but I am, essentially leading, organizing, cheerleading, problem solving, right? All those things with all those different groups. I'm bringing people back together. I'm reporting out. I'm doing all those kinds of things. So I think it is a lot to the finish line on all those district goals. I think I'll have enough, and I'm planning to have enough to share on those 3 goals to give you all a sense of significant progress on the development of those things. And some will be quicker than others. So if you look through, and some of Katie's work, for example, in priority area 3, some of those areas won't be quite as long. Like her work on budget development and essentially, like, I think we're going to do some pretty significant work in terms of recasting the budget process collectively together, and that's definitely Katie's vision. So by the time we are going through this process, that will be completed, just as an example. So some of those things will be completed, some will be, as you mentioned, instructional framework and MTSS both are going to take longer. But we'll have work products to share to show kind of progress and focus and everything else.
In terms of what you were just asking about, Mark, and then thinking about the professional practice goal in relation to the leadership model, and just another thing to kind of acknowledge is just that in your other assistant superintendent role, you have a 0.4, 0.6 interim person, right? So I feel like that's better than last year, but it's still not like you're not yet operating with full capacity team.
Yep.
So I know that was something we had to kind of think about last year, and we'll just, in terms of looking ahead to our process, that's just something. Even Dr. Watts obviously is, really well positioned to do a lot for the time that she's here, and also it will be at least like another year until you're, working kind of full steam ahead. So just want everybody to keep that in mind.
Yep.
And that's important for our budget building process as well, obviously. So.
Yeah. Well, and with the hiring process too, that timing doesn't coincide with town meeting.
Right.
So we have that reality.
But I sure do appreciate the, not watering down of the goals. Like, since you went to all the trouble to actually articulate these ambitious and really important goals for us, that you're holding yourself accountable to those goals through your own performance is, that's, I think, admirable and like good that you're doing that, rather than just kind of giving yourself like ways to
some softballs.
Yeah, right.
Well, I mean, the work itself is multi-year, right? So there are like stages along the way where we're all assessing, like I'm assessing with our team and you all are assessing my work. I think pulling out some things to have like everything would have a final point would be, like if you looked at the overview of all the work, you'd be taking out you'd be excising like sentences from a paragraph and presenting them instead of the whole paragraph. And so I think that's important to me, just in terms of like everything I'm sharing with everybody who's listening too, is like helping people to see the vision and understand like in totality where we're headed. And there's still lots and lots of work to do to help people to understand this, and I think some of it is just through doing, where we're going to have to kind of get moving and get people involved. And like an example instructional framework, some people have a good idea of what that means, and some people don't know what that means. Like what does it really mean to me as a teacher at Pierce? What does that mean to me? So we have lots of work ahead this year to build that.
Were we trying to vote on this tonight, or would it make sense to delay that, given we're missing 2 members? Do we need to vote?
No, I think,
There is a vote.
I think if the 4 of us are ready to go ahead and vote, then I think we will do that. And what we're saying
to always
to,
talk to me too.
yeah, exactly, Selena and Amanda, is if they have questions or want some dialogue around what these goals represent, then you're more than happy to have that follow up with them. And so I think that was also, they had that opportunity. So they were shared ahead to sort of do that ahead as well.
I don't necessarily think they'll have feedback that would say like, hey, you need to change your goals.
Yeah.
I even from a timeline perspective, wonder if there's any downside of just waiting for the night, just having the vote motion next week, say like the goals as we discussed last time, and giving them that way all 6 of us are on the record in terms of like feeling good about these goals and being the goals that we will ultimately all 6 of us evaluate Peter on at the end of the year. But if there's a timing reason why pushing forward tonight is, I certainly personally don't have any issues with the goal. I think they're, again, as we've discussed, very rigorous, but that was my only thought, given we're missing a not insignificant number of our members.
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't really thought about it from that perspective. Peter, I don't know what your opinion on that is. I mean, it is, sure, we can hold a vote next time. We don't, I mean, as we have so many time-consuming, important things that we are going to be doing next time. So part of me is interested in just allowing this to have been something that we sort of acted upon to make space for the things that are still coming up. But
Everybody else is comfortable moving forward, then I'm fine with that.
what do you think?
I'm good either way. Yeah.
I didn't mean to make it more difficult. Let's see. I should have said it that.
I'm just going to say we're going to vote on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't get indication from either of them that was something they had, and we all know, like, there's things that come up and if we can't come, we can't come.
Yeah.
I could reach out to them individually too, or the 2 of them, and say, hey.
Yeah, and we'll have so many opportunities, like, as the process unfolds, to talk about this further. I think we'll just kind of respect the timeline that we've set out for right now. But does anyone have any other questions or discussion of these at this
No,
time?
I think this is great. I appreciate the consistency. I appreciate that you've kind of, ever since kind of the beginning, the steps you've taken to get to here. So I look forward to seeing you progress in this. And some, as you mentioned, some of these might take longer, and you're working with, in some cases, limited resources, right? And so we, obviously we've taken that into consideration, and even through this process, just looking at this, but I appreciate that you have a vision and you have these steps to get us there, and you're working towards it every day, right? And that's huge. Every day you're working towards it. And so that shows there's going to be progress. And, and I just want to say I was at the, it's slightly off topic, but at the Pierce open house the other day, and I had an opportunity to talk to lots of parents, and the positive feedback I got from the students' experiences there, it's a lot different than it was a few years ago. So that shows that the work that you are doing, even though you're taking day by day and going, and sometimes this takes longer, you're making a difference. So that's huge. So great work. Excited.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you once again for making it easy for us and giving us this DESI template formatting, which saves us cutting and pasting down the road. But it also keeps us aligned with the process, which we adopted only last year for the first time with integrity. So this is good. I'm going to make a motion to approve the 2024-2025 superintendent's goals as presented.
I second that.
Second, Bow. Okay. All in favor? Okay. Great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, under the chair's report, back to our goals as a school committee. So, I do want to apologize because I have cleaned up the version that we have in our folder right now, but I had neglected to do that until very recently. But when you look at it now, it's clean. It incorporates all of our edits through our discussion last meeting. And I'm wondering if there's any further discussion of anything that we have here. And we can take a couple minutes to look through it. Any additional changes?
That's great.
Thank you.
Does feel nice and aligned with the goals that you just shared.
Yep.
That was great.
Should be. So will be great to get these out, on the website. Maybe, well, we should approve these before I talk about that piece. But for both of these sets of goals, just making sure everybody understands what we're holding ourselves accountable to. But if there aren't any further changes, I'll make a motion to approve the 2024-2025 Milton School Committee goals as presented.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Great. So maybe we can, I don't know what what the right way is in one of the upcoming letters.
District-wide, yeah,
communications or yeah.
That's where we put
Yeah.
school committee stuff in the past, so that makes sense.
Okay. When is the next one of those?
I think we're going to do one in about a week.
Okay.
It's like every other week? Or
No, in about a week. We usually send those district-wide ones. They're quasi-monthly,
Yeah.
not exactly monthly. My communications are monthly, but those are.
Okay. I don't have anything else under the chair's report tonight. So I'll just hand it over to finance.
Great. Well, you know, all of us were there. So it's mostly for the community and for BOW. We had a finance committee meeting this morning, talked through some old business, which was the SY25, kind of end of school year 24, budget gap and potential analysis of SY25 based upon kind of what we saw at the end of 24. Katie's been working hard to kind of identify those gaps. She's tracking some areas of concern. Still not, again, 100% confident where we'll land because we need some information related to funding from the state for circuit breaker, which is special education funding, which we'll know more about in October. So again, Katie is on it, sharing that with us, and we expect to have kind of more information at our, if not next meeting, kind of the finance committee meeting after that in the middle of October. So we also just talked through kind of the budget calendar as a whole and where we stand, and again, we'll start working with the select board and likely the warrant committee here starting in kind of October timeframe. You know, we also started talking about we still don't have clarity from the select board around if there's an operational override or if they're going to be looking for a level service budget or something else. Going into next year, we do expect to get that information from, or at least some projections of next year from Nick Milano, the town administrator. Again, kind of early in October, that's typically the pattern. You know, we talked a bit about, and I raised it of like, you know, I have some significant concerns around our ability to be able to manage our budget into next year as a town as a whole, the schools specifically, and meet the goals we just set for ourselves, and you know, all the things Peter's talking about with the implementation plan, with even a level service budget, right? That doesn't provide us any ability to kind of invest in these areas. Obviously, as Peter's talked about, there are opportunities to reinvest move some things around, but we know our financial resources are limited given where we fall in terms of our per pupil funding, which is kind of that bottom quartile. So just started talking that at a fairly high level, but you know, given where we ended up last year with the timeline and kind of how it felt like we just ran out of time to have the conversation of like, actually we need more funding. Want to make sure as a group we are talking about that early and often, and you know, making sure we are aligned on what we think we need, and hearing that from Peter and Katie, and then saying that clearly to the town as a whole and the select board and warrant committee in particular. So started that conversation, and then lastly, Katie has started putting together kind of an FAQ document around the budget process, you know, key things to understand, to know about the budget process. Gave her a little feedback on that in terms of some other things potentially to add, but overall just a great tool that, again, I think goes with some of our goals around like community engagement and you know, making sure we are informing the public and helping them, pull them along in the process, in this case specifically about the budget. But those are the things we discussed, and our next meeting is in 2 weeks on the 2nd. Any questions or anything to add from other folks?
No.
I did have like a random question just to like throw out, given the rest of my finance committee members aren't here, so I think it'll be something like when I ask them about. But we when we have the remote ones, we had a recording of it. Just as I was running the meeting, like realized we have a recording that is saved on the school district's Zoom account. I know it came up last year with the recording stuff of like, hey, folks were pushing to have subcommittee meetings, which I don't particularly agree with personally, but from a finance committee standpoint, I think that's obviously a place people care a lot about, especially in terms of the schools. And so I'd like to throw it out for discussion, if not as a formal policy, just as like a practice maybe of like, if we have an online meeting and have a recording, send that over to Milton Access, make their lives a little bit harder, but ask them to post it just so it's out there and there's more information. I think that would also, in my opinion, be helpful for warrant committee members, because I know Lori, one of the warrant committee members who is always able to be there, and she's very diligent about like attending those meetings, but most of them can't come to those. And that's just a place where we talk in a lot more depth about even than the things like we're able to get into in this kind of larger meeting. So, for a couple reasons.
Are the finance committee meetings going to continue to be on Zoom?
I don't know if all of them will be on Zoom. We talked about potentially having some, and I think if we don't have them on Zoom, then we won't have a recording.
Yeah, so that's all I wanted to just
Be clear about.
be clear about, is that we're not talking about recording
Every meeting.
subcommittee meetings voluntarily that are not required to be recorded in every case, but what you're proposing is when they are on Zoom fully remote and it's very easy to just hit record, we will do our best to remember to do that.
Yeah, I think as like if we have that recording, it should be fairly easy. In this particular situation, there will be other ones that it won't be able to do it. But
I mean, sure. I think that's great. The more we're able to document the process for people, that's helpful. And as long as we're not just sort of unintentionally creating like a different standard for ourselves that people will then be expecting. That's my only, on principle, that's the only thing I want to be careful about.
Got it. Well, again, I wanted to probably want to talk to Selena and Amanda and have been able to connect with them on that, but wanted to throw that out there.
I mean, I think. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, because mine is a suggestion. You want to go first?
I actually think it's a good idea, only because I feel like last year we kind of ran out of time, right? So I think this kind of gives a window into our discussions. So even if select board members and warrant committee members wanted to see what we're kind of doing in our thought process and all the stuff that we hash out in those meetings, right? So it's not like we landed on this because we wanted to. We went through this whole process and kind of bring them into that whenever they choose to, which I think will really help our budget process, especially like with all the stuff that you're creating. I think this is just another way of being transparent when we can, right? Like when we have those meetings and the ability, it's there. Like, and I know sometimes we discuss things, the same topics over, it takes a while to go through the budget. So I think it's helpful, and I think this is a big year of, we have a lot of needs, right? And I think it could help, honestly.
Yep. No, that makes sense.
Yeah. And my suggestion is that, we have the minutes that is approved in usually 1 or 2 meetings after. If we can have that link just attached in those meeting minutes, so for people who are looking on the town website or public school website and trying to find out what happened in our last meetings, there is a recording link as well there.
That's interesting. Yeah, I don't know if we even do that with our regular school committee meetings.
No, we don't.
It's interesting to.
You need a link in the.
It's a good idea.
In the minutes?
Yeah, in the minutes.
Oh.
In the minutes,
minutes.
It's just like everything is in one place. The written minute summary is there. The video recording is there. If we have a video recording, obviously, I also agree with you. Like if we don't want to establish another set of standard or expectation that people expect us to record our subcommittee meetings.
Yeah.
But I think,
Yeah.
to Mark's point, though, finance is an important
Yeah.
one that
Yeah.
everyone's interested in.
I totally
So
agree.
I think when we have, you know, again, I think we're just trying to be proactive and helpful, and keep people informed about the process and what we go through, and the requests that we have to kind of maneuver through and work through.
Yeah.
It's good.
I think it's a good idea. I can try and do that as I create the meeting for finance.
And that will be the new bar for every other committee in town to meet.
Trial balloon.
Just
Right, yeah.
raise the bar.
No, it
No,
just
as
makes
y'all
sense.
know, I've been
Yeah.
crushing
It makes
Zoom
sense.
lately.
It-
You have.
Crushing, yeah.
It makes
No
total
issues.
sense.
It also saved me some work as well. When I try to look for
Oh, that's what this is.
that's the main guy is to help me. When I try to look for previous meetings and I had to dig it out from
Yeah.
the Milton SSTV and then try to find which one is it. Like if I come here, I scroll through the minutes. Yeah, it's just there.
This is another thing we could fix that.
Yeah. And it matches our goal, right? The
That's
the
true.
increased community transparency and
That's true.
Absolutely.
Yep.
communication in general.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
So that's the update. Then the other thing we have is the approval of 2 vendor warrants. So I sent those out earlier today because I signed them earlier today. So
Thank you.
if there's any questions about those, please jump in. But for the sake of just moving this forward, I'll make the motions and then we can have discussion. So I'll make a motion to approve vendor warrant number 9 in the amount of $492,865.20 payable on September 11th, 2024, and vendor warrant 10 in the amount of $634,685.39 payable on September 19th, 2024. Second?
Second.
Great. Take your second, just for the person who does the minutes.
we share the airtime.
Any discussion?
No, thank you.
No?
Appreciate you sending those out.
If not, all in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you all.
Okay. Thanks, Mark. Moving on to policy. Anna.
Okay, so we just met today, right before school committee, so I'll do my best to put my thoughts together. So we met today, Lizzie Bell and I and Dr. Pavlicek. We discussed policy ACR and JIE, which have been updated with the new legal language based on the changes in the Title IX language so that we're in compliance. You'll notice that some of the language in policy JIE will still need to be revisited when we get to Section J, because we are only at Section G, so we have a little bit to go. But once we get there, we will have to look at that. But what we decided as a committee is to bring these 2 policies to the full school committee for an expedited approval because they have the Title IX language change. And then we also went through Section G of our policies, just like we've been doing in the past with all our other policies. We've kind of taken batches of them and going through making sure that any of those that are no longer needed or are redundant, we've updated them. And Glenn has been so nice to put a document, there are some documents in our folder for tonight that has the red line versions for all of them. He's also created like a recommendation sheet that shows basically the changes to each one of them. So there are a series of policies, I'm not going to read all of them, but they have kind of what the change is next to them. So there are ones that, MPS policies that are no longer recommended by MASC, and they can be deleted. We also have policies that should be reaffirmed without changes. And there's no difference between the ones that we have in the MASC ones other than some changes in language that are Milton specific. We also have a series of policies that need to be updated. So there are notes listed next to each of them, just so you have a high level of what each of the changes are for all of those policies. And then we, as a committee, decided to bring Section G, policy recommendations, to the full school committee for a first reading tonight. So that was our meeting in a nutshell. Do you have any questions?
I have just a question. There's two, well, first of all, there's a lot of policies that are redundant or unnecessary, so way to clean the books here.
Shows you how long it's been.
I know.
There were 2 or 3 that just said like this policy is cross-listed with ACAB, which was updated previously. Replace this policy with the updated language of ACAB. So does that mean we already have ACAB? I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I think it's just the reference at the bottom that was updated. I think there was one specific one we talked about today.
Field trip.
No, not the field
No,
trip
that's
one.
for
that
another.
we still need to do.
Oh, got you. So the updated language is not the policy of the entire like GBB is the same.
No,
as
it's
ACAB.
just that
the
cross-reference.
of
Yes,
Gotcha.
those. Yes, I clarified that with Glenn. So yep, there's a lot of reading on those, but those are all in our folders with the edits, and then that was it. And then, of course, because of the 2 policies that are affected by Title IX, we just have to do an expedited approval on those 2, just so that we're in compliance.
So maybe on Section G, we can, like if Selena or Amanda have any questions
They can
as they look through
yeah.
the documents, they can follow up with you for
yeah.
clarification before next meeting, so that they feel like if they would have had questions now, look through all the pages.
Yeah, and our meetings are cross-posted if anyone wants to join.
Right.
Yeah, I feel bad.
You don't
I'll
see
always
quite
come
as
to our
much
finance
action
ones.
as finance.
It's not as there's a lot of, but Glenn does a very good job just taking us through it in a very short amount of time. So it's been that whole process has been streamlined, and it's good. So, all right, if there are no other questions, then I will make a motion using the expedited approval process to approve policy ACR, non-discrimination policy including harassment and retaliation, and policy JIE, pregnant students, as recommended by MASC. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Awesome, thank you. That's it.
Thank you. And back to you, Mark, School Building Committee report.
All right. So long update. We have both a meeting, which is pretty substantive, and MSBA visit. Peter took some of the
I knew I was going to get
some of the bullets out of the ammunition here. But again, walkthrough Tuesday, I completely agree. Thought it went well. I've never done a walkthrough before, so I don't know what a bad walkthrough feels like, to be honest. So like maybe it was a terrible one and they hated it, but they were smiling and they seemed to respond to the data we were giving. Again, shout out to Sean, who was there, presentation as he always is, fantastic. I agree. Shout out to John and Holly for, at this point they've given that tour so many times because this has been an issue for so long that they are unfortunately seasoned veterans at this and can give that tour in their sleep. So I think that, again, big hats off to them. That's also extremely sad that's what our principals are becoming experts in, is how to point out all the space challenges and try and convince people that this is kind of a real problem that we need to address with urgency. So, but that also thank you to Katie, who helped organize with MSBA and converse with them and knows more about this process than I think any of the rest of us in the room. So she's been a big help too. So yeah, some of the data we got out that I thought would be interesting, it shared 28 communities are currently in kind of continuing in the running with MSBA. Over the past 3 years, they gave us data points of like 1 year was 10 got in, 1 year 19 got in, 1 year 15 got in. So the average is about a little over 14 a year. And again, that varies by year because essentially they have a budget they have to stay within. And so high school projects are more expensive, vocational projects are more expensive. So if those come in, they might take less schools. If it's just elementary schools, those are less expensive. But if there's 28 and about 14 get in, then as he said, that's about a coin flip of our chance to get in, not considering any of the other any of the other kind of stuff. I'll remind folks that our priority areas that we've like applied by are the priority area 2 and I think it's priority area 4. So they have a bunch of priorities. So we're not the highest priority. The highest priority is like deteriorating facility conditions, which I think is what we applied for 20 years ago when Milton got it. But we are the second highest priority, and then the 4th highest priority in terms of the things we have said are the reasons we're applying. So overall, I also want to be clear, like if we don't get picked, it's not MSBA saying that Milton doesn't have a need. That is not what they would be saying. They would just be saying that they can't fulfill all the need that is out there. And so they are prioritizing need. So there's sometimes it gets out there of like, well, there must not be a problem because MSBA hasn't picked us. And so that is not really what this process is about. The other thing that they reiterated, unfortunately, is that the timeline to go through the process is about 5 to 7 years. So that is, it's great if we get through in terms of the potential financial benefits of offsetting cost, but obviously that is a concerning timeline, but that is the timeline. So kind of the fastest to move through the process would be about like 5 years. They also shared our reimbursement rate for Milton. The rate was 45.32%. That's for the current year. That changes year over year, so we wouldn't be applying for the current year. That rate might go down, it might go up. Honestly, I failed to ask them like what our rate was last year, if they had any of that, to see kind of what the trend line is. But from a data point perspective, that's our current rate. Also, to be clear, what that means is that's only for eligible costs. There are lots of costs on a project that are not eligible costs. So if the project is $100 million, we're not going to get $45 million from MSBA. It will certainly be less than that, but that's kind of like the maximum cost. And then within that, they even have like caps on certain types of work and things like that. To remind folks, pre-K is not a part of MSBA, so none of the pre-K costs would be covered by anything within MSBA. But I thought that was, again, other good data points that we got. Timeline-wise, they reiterated they have a board meeting on December 13th where they kind of finally vote. However, they did say they would let us know sometime in November if we are going to get accepted and be voted to be approved in December. So I assume that's probably towards the end of November. But they're also not going to call us and tell us we didn't get in, because we didn't get that last year, at least. So if we don't hear from them in November, I think that's kind of when we'll know we didn't get it. Or hopefully if they do call us, obviously we'll know we did. So we'll have a little bit more advance notice than December 13th when their board meeting is. Yeah, and so that was the update on the MSBA. Before I get into the meeting update, any questions y'all have on that?
So besides pre-K, what are considered like costs that wouldn't be covered, for instance, just to understand?
Yeah, I don't know all of them. There's design costs.
Okay.
There's things like within the process where, based upon MSBA's calculations, they don't think we need it, like an auditorium, right? They'd say like, you don't need an auditorium for this type of school, and we might say, well, we do. Pierce Players is really important to us. They'd say like, great, you can build the auditorium. We're not paying for it. It might be that they'd pay for, a small music space, but we want a slightly bigger one based upon our programming, or we want something else so there are pieces related to both size restrictions and certain programmatic types that we might choose that would be ineligible. And then there's also the stuff of like MSBA doesn't really fund with enrollment projections, right? They're not saying like it's based upon your kind of current enrollment is my understanding. And so if we wanted to try and do something better than what we did 20 years ago where we built to current enrollment and very quickly exceeded that, that also I believe would be kind of ineligible costs, like building kind of extra class, like an extra team of classrooms kind of at the.
So would they, for instance, like let's say we get selected, would they change what we end up building? Like in the sense, like would they say like, no, you know, you might be better off with another elementary school versus a middle school, like once they do their studying, like of the district?
Yeah, it's possible.
Okay.
And again, this is why it would take 5 to 7 years. It would start us back to the beginning.
Okay.
They wouldn't, like, we'd have this data that we could share and obviously use in discussions, but they would require us to kind of restart everything.
Okay.
And relook at everything. And we are applying for, due to space constraints in an elementary school, right? We have to pick one, and so we pick Cunningham, even though we have space constraints across the district. So that is like where they are first looking at, and within the visit, even like that was a lot of their questions were around Cunningham, Collicott in particular. But we did, even within that discussion, get in, like, try and let them see and know about, like, this is a broader issue, and this is how we got to our place. And they brought in not just members from MSBA, but architects who consult with MSBA, and like they seem to understand
The context of the big picture that goes beyond just the SOI that had been submitted. So that was, I think, helpful and important for them to be able to grasp that.
Okay, so I have a question. If we didn't hear back from them in November, what is the next step?
Moving forward, we have Arrow Street, right? We have this design. We are continuing to refine a bit before we kind of fully run out of our funds. MSBA, then it's like continuing with the path of not the non-MSBA project, which we're on right now, and that still at some point required, like if they invite us in, we also then need to make the decision point at that point of like, do we opt in? And the escalation over doing a project much quicker, you know, on a $173 million project versus something else, potentially could be, but it certainly would mean like a $173 million project in 7 years is going to be like, you know, $250,000. So, which is, but anyways, that would be a good problem to have, to have options. Any other questions about MSBA?
No, great work submitting and getting us into this.
I'm 1 for 1 in my SOI submission. You know, no offense, Ada.
Hey.
Had a school building committee meeting, not this Monday, then the Monday before. A couple of things that came up there. Like they still had more questions to ask. We are still waiting to get details as a committee on what the select board would like, what they need, and in order to give us kind of some direction to begin investigating on that feedback. So it's been a little over a month without that information, so we are continuing to push on that. Arrow Street is continuing to lay. The plan was like we had 8 teams, 4 for 7th, 4 for 8th. That's where we were at, like the not quite 200,000 square feet, but something like, anyways, a class that might exist. And so that just means that the original like box plan, that kind of how these spaces are flowing together and connecting versus kind of the very broad level look we had before, which is again, interesting conversation. We had some brief discussion of a space assessment, this report, and then asked for us to respond to it. So that was part of the conversation. Ultimately, kind of in the assessment, there were kind of some significant, my takeaway from what they were trying to say in the report was, or a very small need of like 5 classrooms. But again, essentially, Sean did at the school building committee to kind of talk about this. You know, honestly, it was like a somewhat frustrating Monday and Tuesday in Cunningham and Collicott with principals who are like just desperate for space and have talked about full to claim that it's like this is faking or that we are lying about the fact that this is a need. So anyways, but we discussed that. The committee did was we voted to recommend 2 warrant articles, and that's something that this group should, I'll get the exact language before we vote kind of next meeting, $5 million for design services that would cover, I think, 9 drawings for the building, right, which is kind of one stage before construction drawings, and then construction drawings for the site for design for the project just before construction drawings. So on supporting that motion, that would be a warrant that would go to the select board would still need to agree. I mean, they need to schedule. The second one was an ask, a warrant for the full funding for the project. Town meeting support a project at this level, and so let's put it out to them when we're about to have a fall town meeting. This body has voted to support. We've had town meeting votes in the past to support, but without a number certainly, and so the school building committee took on warrants that they suggested.
I have a couple of questions. So is select board working on the questions that they need to?
How to say this? So there was some robust conversation at the meeting around meeting, and so we think we now have that at least clear, and have the path forward to try and get those answers.
Okay.
There was some frustration around like the delay. Clarity on that, but yes, that ask is in. I believe that's going to be on the next select board agenda, which would be.
Do they able to figure out how much like square footage they can reduce from the 200,000, or is that kind of still?
No, that was the 200,000 folks wanted.
Yeah, I thought it was like
and then
120 or
we jumped
150
it
or
down to
something,
like
right? Yeah.
175,
Yeah.
and then
Okay.
it's a lot of space. It's going to
Yeah.
be a lot of cost.
Okay.
And so that was
Okay.
kind of where that came in. But I can't remember exactly how much square footage
You would
that in
reduce.
particular costs. But
Yeah.
again,
Okay.
with one of the presentations I shared previously in like sizing things that we changed before we got to the 173 million kind of square footage size.
Okay. Having the design costs and so they can keep moving forward. Do we know like how would we fund that? Like, is that something that the town has? That work? Like, how would we, with all the other asks and with potential operational override, how does
Yeah.
that kind of fit in with the rest of the asks?
Yeah, I think it's a debt obligation override
Okay.
vote because it's still within a range in which the town could take on.
Okay.
Also, with debt obligation would just be kind of wrapped up into the overall debt obligation.
Okay.
So that would be taken off kind of the town's traditional debt obligation books, but
Okay.
lenders on to pull debt similar to other capital improvements.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then what, like, so with the full app?
Yeah, and I believe it has to be 90 days after if the town meeting votes in the affirmative, the town.
Cool, thank you.
Of course. Great questions. Good. All right. I want to throw out one other thing that's related to the project for discussion. The number, the 173, I know we've talked about, right, that is a big number, and like, is there ways to cut that? And so the others to cut square footage, as we were just talking about, like going from 8 to 7 classrooms. And so, right, I mean, as a conversation within this body, not within school building committee, is a conversation of like, do we want to cut the pre-K program from we would need to give to the school building committee, because that's really a programmatic decision, and this body is the one that initially to the upper middle school pre-K, and we could change that again to say just an upper middle school, cut out the pre-K. But that obviously has implications for that lessens the space we gain at the other schools, right? That do things think it's worth discussing, given we're talking about such a large amount of money and such a big impact. And so there's a couple things I looked into related to this question. All right. So this is the square footage of like breakdown of the costs for this, $173 million, right? We're talking about construction costs, 127, and then you got overhead and profit, other things. But essentially what the breakdown is, and this column is the new middle school, this column is the pre-K, are OPMs. When we first got the project costs broke down kind of from the project estimate, what was pre-K versus the kind of main building, and this is the breakdown. So about $18.4 million of the 173.6
Is what you would save in pre-K.
is what the pre-K costs.
Okay.
Yeah, is that again, all of this is, to be clear, like at this point, it continues to be an estimate, but that is the breakdown of that estimate, and then 155.2 is the main building. So that's the number that if we eliminated the pre-K, we think we could get it down to. I'll also just name for context, like it's probably, I would guess, a little bit above that, because I'd assume if we take out the pre-K, there's still some work that we would do with the space where the pre-K was going to be that wasn't incorporated within the initial scope, like field, landscaping, like whatever it might be back there. And I have something to share on that too, in terms of just something I was trying to look into. But I wouldn't say like we'd get 100% of the savings. We should probably get all of that savings, but just wanted to name that for context. The other thing I tried to look into was just what would this site look like. What would the site look like if we didn't get the pre-K? And so I asked the architects if they could just show me. So this is the full school building site. Over here is the pre-K building, and this is the parking lot is for kind of the pre-K building. So one would assume this building would go away, this parking lot might all go away. It is possible a couple of these spaces are actually needed for the main building. So there's definitely design things that we'd have to figure out. But then all this area back here would be open, and the question I had, because it's so difficult to get field space, is could we fit a field back here? The answer is yes, we could have a field. The size of the field is the question. And so this pink is supposed to be a U13 soccer field, right? 50 yards by 100 yards. And so my reading of this, given you see all these tight slopes, this is the slope of the hillside, is that the only way to really fit a soccer field on the site would be to essentially do a significant amount of retaining walls here, which probably isn't feasible. And so you're not going, I don't think, in my look at this, and again, I hesitate for all this because I'm not the architect, and the architect might have great ideas to say we could get it in there. But my sense of just this rough map is we're not going to be able to get a soccer field back there if that was somebody's hope. But if this is 100 yards, call this 80 yards, you can get 50 by 80 and have open space. That was another personal concern of mine with the project as a whole, is just for the upper middle school kids, there's very little actual open space that they have access to on their school site. So this gives space for them in particular and for the town as a whole. That's assuming if that's what we want to leave it as open space as part of the project. And maybe we don't. Maybe we want it to be something else. But figuring out what, if you didn't do the pre-K program, again, what would you turn that space to, and is there another resource that you could turn it into separate from the pre-K, I think is part of the conversation of the trade-offs. So kind of throwing that bomb out there to just say, I think this is the right place to discuss it.
No, I'm glad you're actually
conversation.
bringing it here to discuss, because I think I suggested maybe doing a field back there because there is a shortage of fields and places for kids to practice. And just like we saw the Glover presentation, like having more spaces that are usable is always a great idea. The other thing, though, sharing those numbers on the pre-K cost and the upper middle school cost has me now thinking, right? What would our cost be? And I'm not trying to, I know, headed in this direction for a very long time, so I'm not trying to derail this by any means, but I'm just trying to understand what our options are. Is it possible to do a pre-K-K? Would that help us save space or help us with space at the other schools?
So the reason we got, because the pre-KK was assessed, like that was one of the options that was looked at. The issue is that by pulling kindergarten out, you accomplish essentially the same thing as pulling 5th grade out, but you're not doing anything to help Pierce, which now is 1,000 kids. Like Pierce has significant space issues. So you help the elementary schools, you don't help Pierce. And you also don't then help the high school, which these 300, like right now all our high school cohorts are 250, 260. All the Pierce ones are 330, 360. And so those cohorts are going to move. The high school right now is not feeling the burden in the way I think they're going to in 5 years. And they're already tight on space, as you know, from our walkthrough. So like that's the issue with that plan is it alleviates the pressure across 4 of our elementary schools, but it leaves the problem at our upper schools. And so likely what that means is like we need to do another project pretty soon after this in order to alleviate that space. So the whole idea of the upper middle school was this elegant solution of one project to address space needs across all 6 school sites.
And I totally understand that. I'm just looking at options on how to bring that number down, and that's really where this is coming from, is just, we know we need to address the space issue. Like how can we communicate this to the community in a way where they're like, oh, okay, that's not that bad, and are willing to support it, versus, we don't want to, I just want to see, like, is that a possibility? Or, I mean, we could always remove central office from the high school to create some more space there.
I've gotten taxed now. I'll go kicking and screaming.
Yeah, I guess.
With the kindergarten and pre-K kids.
I certainly appreciate the point. And again, I would just like reemphasize, like it has been looked, like it was looked at, it has been looked at, and I think that is important to remind the community that like within the 5 years, it has, and it was discussed. And again, the problem is, as I said, like it doesn't
help. Yeah.
Well, it helps. Like any space helps, right?
Yeah.
You build a single classroom that helps. It's simply a matter of like what is the thing that is going to really address the space issue and provide it's come online, right? The MBTA, so like all the things where we think like the data at this point, and we saw with enrollment. So yeah, that's the issue. And also, I'd also name that, right? This is, our pre-K enrollment is tiny even compared to our kindergarten. So it's not like
what would it be to add 1 grade versus, a 7th and 8th amenities they would need there versus in kindergarten. So I was just trying to figure out like how do we, into this, because this is really helpful, and I think this is something that we should just continue to kind of
expect to be clear. Right, like the school building committee has provided direction of we want, and I voted in favor of it. We might want to pull back the project slightly in order to reduce costs. And from my perspective, the reason to reduce costs is, I think, as you were, and I think just building the upper middle school is a significant improvement that will really help address a lot of the things that, again, like John and Holly talked.
I also really appreciate you bringing this. I think it's critical that we actually make moves to do that work of allow would be something less than 173. So you're getting us started on that discussion. I feel like I want to go on the record to say it's disappointing and like frustrating to as you kind of said when we talked about the tours, like with MSBA, the need is real, and in having array have existed for several years and will continue to exist, that contribution to like an actual solutions oriented compromise the majority of voters in town. So it makes me sad to think of, but at the same time, it's, what it seems to be the case is that, a solution for us that would not compromise so much that it would undermine stay in Cunningham and Tucker and, or other existing elementary buildings.
I think there would be available space in all of our schools, right?
So the 5th grade leaving the elementary schools would provide enough room to both address the.
I mean, it opens up a lot of options, essentially. I think you articulated it well. I mean, the ideal would be to continue with the full project. I think that's team would say that. I did meet with the director of the preschool and talked with her about this and as you said, like it's not ideal, but feel like that opens up, it brings a lot of options in terms of supporting that program, and I think that's decision making down the road, so we don't need to decide that right now, but I think where our enrollment is right now, the increase of classroom space across 4 elementary schools, there are just lots of opportunities that open up. So we feel like it's important to bring this number down, and I think everyone.
One thing I'll just say to Anna, the idea you were raising, I mean, totally in the spirit of like just finding the consensus solution. But honestly, when you were talking about the idea of a pre-KK building, I mean, and especially understanding MSBA timeline, should we that will attend that school are alive, Are we going to ask voters to like vote? I do think there's something to be said for doing what we can to help. There's still like an exclusively pre-KK building, because especially if we're on a 5 to 7 year plan, we're gonna have to vote on it. So I think that just makes it that much more of a challenge to make it real and feel like people are bought in to this as a solution. Again, I wish we weren't in this position.
Right.
But
I think you're going to have that same.
If we go to the pre-K, that's 100% of the families.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, sure, maybe people who are still moving in or who are like really younger and starting there for the people. And it's true. It's an important point that no matter what, we're asking people to invest in our town, and our vast majority of people that we would need to agree to support this will not benefit directly. So even if they're, I do have one question. And so just for the time frame for us, back to like the, so trying and inferring that it's too small a site for an actual, like,
Just
to
confirm my
because
understanding.
because that honestly, like, that would make a difference. I think.
Actually think there would be a lot of support because I think that's something that kids of all ages can benefit from, because we don't have any fields. And I would speak for myself. Girls play field hockey, and we haven't had a single game in Milton. and they're asking me when's our next home game? We don't have one.
Yeah.
You know, so
Yeah.
I feel like something like that
Yeah.
is actually a good. Hey, we're also getting a field in the process. Like, so that's, you know, I'm glad you're exploring that, because I think, you know, I know I'll be able to attend the middle school,
Right.
for instance.
The way I think about it is if we sacrifice the pre-K, if that's something we ultimately would be choosing to do, beyond just the savings, if there's a way to sort of have a silver lining to that painful decision, that, like a field, that,
The architect this morning, and she just,
okay.
it was too late to get a response, but I will try and get a response, and then base or a
Yeah,
lacrosse
lacrosse
field,
and-
or
yeah.
again, just, you know, hey, we just need practice space, even if it's not actually regulation size. I'm not, but even talking to that board, members of the board might be helpful.
Yeah. And I mean, Peter, just hearing people share feelings on it, and had an opportunity to talk to lots of people now, you know, and, you know, adding something positive like the field where is much needed in this town, I think is a good solution. So
Construction costs are estimated was 80 to 100, and the actual construction cost came in at like 120, and then obviously you got the extra stuff in advance, as we talked about, to try and cut that cost, what we thought the cost was going to be, and that did cut costs. We just didn't get an estimate before that to see like what that was. So though named, like, it's a bit of a guess as terms of like what is the number the town is going to support. I think we all acknowledge that, and I just say that publicly. Majority, maybe we get crushed, right, and just know like very few people would. I've certainly heard many people who are like, "Ooh, that was big number." Clear crystal ball or clear polling even within the town to know for sure. And maybe all the things that are true for 173 are true for 155. We would really love for
Yeah.
Bernadette, those staff.
Yeah.
But, you know, without having a crystal ball, I think like just the costs much closer to, right, that like $100 million.
it increases significantly, then everybody has a pause, you know, like when it, so I think the closer you can get to that original number, give or take, of supporting it. And I think now that people have heard the 173, like anything less than that is positive, right? I know it's like, I know how passionate you are about this, and, you know, I want to make sure, like, you know, you get the support.
If you, the work that the town administrator did, right, in terms of what is the average cost per household, right, it's just under like 11 coffee from Dunkin'. Just naming that as well. Like, even, you know, you look at this number at like the big perspective, it becomes more manageable. However, you know, I still don't think that takes away from the fact that we want to try and make it even more manageable and less negatively impactful for folks, and so folks feel like they can support this, because that is the goal of how do we get to a place where.
Do you remember what the rebate was on the 155 that we get back from?
For like the energy stuff.
Yeah, was it like 7 million?
Yeah, I can't remember.
It would bring the full project under 150 when you factor in the rebate. Something like that.
I don't want to. I can look into that. So be like some slight design things we could do to that maybe come up from the architects. I don't know what those would be. That might make it lower. There's also stuff that like might make it higher if we're not building a pre-K that we want to invest in actually. Cunningham, Collicott, Glover, Tucker, whatever it is, for pre-K and improve the spaces that they're in. Like, that's a cost that we should consider. That would make. I would hesitate to say like it's definitely we're going to be able to cut $18.5 million out of this
Committee, ultimately, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that nitty gritty is not stuff that we're responsible for here,
Yes.
but rather just the opening up of the possibility of site. So
Yeah.
we'll definitely have this on our agenda next meeting. And if you are able to bring any additional information.
Of like what is the dimension of a field that could fit back there, right? Or, you know, and then what their thoughts are in terms of need for field space and size, and you know how that might align or. It's just on the. Where is it? There it is. All right. Sorry. On the lower end, it's the restriction of the land swap. So this is the high value forested area that when Sean pulled back the idea and reconfigured this, so we can't build past this line essentially. I believe it is. Maybe I'm wrong, and it's possibly come out a little bit more. So I'll double check that this actually goes all the way to the line. The width doesn't seem to be as much of an issue, but obviously we're hemmed in a little bit on like the setback from the neighbors, and there's that little bit of conservation kind of strip here as well. And then on this side, you know, if we have a property line as well, because the Brooks Field itself is actually not Milton Public Schools land, it's Parks land. So we're hemmed in here a little bit, but the bigger issue here is the contours. It's just that slope is so steep that the only way to make that work is with retaining walls, and that, from my assessment,
and that's the same on the other side too.
I think another side's higher.
Like
on what other side?
On the other, where the middle school building currently is, like.
Yeah, so like there's already going to need to be retaining walls in order to address this issue of the slope.
Yeah.
But what are those lines like fanning out from
This,
the
parking?
this is parking.
Yeah.
So
These are parking lines, parking spots.
So that's the entrance over there, right?
This is this is the Guile Road. Sorry if I wasn't clear to orient you. This is the Guile Road, the reconfigured Guile Road, right? This is the front parking that is for the building. This is like the bus drop-off line.
Okay. The entrance
Kind of
would
right
be there.
here, and this is the main entrance.
Okay.
Right there.
Is that enough parking?
Yeah, they did calculations in terms of parking. So again, I'm pretty sure that in the conversation, essentially this is all the parking for the pre-K. This is the parking up here. But again, these are some of the things that we'd need to figure out a little bit. You know, I think it's come to this committee like, are we saying that, hey, we'd want to cut the pre-K program, but only if it gets us like this size of space on the back, right? If there's like really comes down to the field as being the lever.
Well,
I do think there's more design implications for that we'd want to work through with the, because I worry about like promising that we 100% can get this given we don't have a finalized building design at this point. So just also want to name that too.
Yeah,
but
everything
it seems like
everything here is just, it's really
it's a
like
discussion. Yeah.
an initial conversation, and ideally by 2 weeks from now, if we're able to have that a little further detail as that's possible to do, then we can. And also because are not here, they have not had the opportunity to consider this in this conversation, so that's going to be important that we can all do that next time. Certainly before we would do anything around making any recommendations.
And I remember previously you have shared another model of the upper middle school and the pre-K is attached.
Yeah, that was a previous design iteration, was a building that integrated pre-K within the overall structure, and the school building committee went away from that because we thought there could be some cost savings with separating the pre-K building outside, given its like, again, pretty modest 2-story structure, and also just have more formal separation between the experience for the kids of the upper middle school and the pre-K, have separate kind of drop-off experience for parents in the back, and like feel like a campus, but feel like its own thing while still leveraging some of the like the cafeteria, the kitchen would still provide food and things like that, so still be near. So yeah, that is no longer a discussion. The committee's kind of pushed beyond that and said it's a separate building.
I will say just one thing that occurred to me in the spirit of like what could ever be silver linings if we moved forward in this decision. If it did allow us to kind of create better intentional pre-K spaces in different parts of the district,
Mm-hmm.
like in more, if not all of our
Yeah.
4 elementary schools,
Mm-hmm.
it could eliminate a transition. Obviously, not all of our students start in pre-K, but I am a family that benefited from the opportunity to attend pre-K and continue. So my 5th grader is in her 7th year in that building, which is really powerful experience in that way. And, I think, so.
Yeah, my only initial thought on that, though, is like from a special ed perspective within which is the vast majority of the pre-K programs, like especially given the a lot of students in some of those
Right.
programs at Cunningham, as I'm thinking about the consolidation of the spaces within one building to consolidate then resources of staffing, like the PT, the OT, who are like doing work with those kids or other like
True.
and not
I
have them
mean,
travel between
that-
buildings.
That
but
was
again,
definitely an advantage of that model. So
Yeah.
then
But
it's about like, how can we still capture as many advantages as possible?
I think it opens, I think to your point, it just opens possibilities, and it's something that the district team, Bernadette, yourselves can think about. They know way better than we do of what the need is for the staff and the students, and make that recommendation. The space and the possibilities to do so, which we don't right now.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, this is good.
Anything else for school building?
It's a very long report.
Told you, it was a good
Made
one.
my policy report look
yeah.
like nothing.
Yeah. That's it. That was it for school building.
Okay, thanks. All right, so we have one set of minutes, September 4th. Does anyone have any edits or changes to the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of Milton's school committee meeting for September 4th, 2024.
I'll second.
All in favor? Okay, thank you. Leaves next meeting agenda. So as we mentioned earlier, there will be a number of items for us on October 9th. We will have the end of year report, town of Milton that is, right? And then the fiscal end of year report for Milton. So those are 3, is that correct? I think that's what that means, fiscal end of year report. Anyway, there are these 3 annual reports that all hit at the same time. We're going to review those in both. The big thing, though, will also be the first quarter report on the implementation plan progress, right? And you're going to be bringing that. It will include a lot of different data to do with HR, the YRBS, and SEL will be incorporated.
We might focus just on priority area 2. Instead of R, just to, I think each quarter will show we'll just be like a drill down. Here's where we are in terms of development in all the areas, and then hone in on one area.
Okay. We had talked about an update process, which is helpful. So that had been something we talked about discussing tonight. Because we're missing 2 of our members, that didn't really make sense, but it also seems helpful to actually re-look at that in the context of what through that implementation plan report. So that actually seems to make sense. But that will be a big sharing of information and opportunity to discuss. I mean, there's nothing for us to approve there. That's just your sort of bringing us updates. And then we'll have a number of subcommittee reports. Finance, we will have met possibly you will have met with the joint finance actually.
Maybe.
We'll have that. We'll have facilities. We'll have school building committee again to continue this discussion. And we'll have our policy because we'll have a second reading on those section G. Anything else that any of us know about at this time?
It would be great. I don't know, have like an update on like the busing situation with like students being on wait lists and what our options are. I don't know if in 2 weeks is too early or, but like.
It's kind of an ongoing.
So you said end of report update, and then is it a separate FY24 fiscal year end report?
I'm just going based on these. I think Charlene put these things in here. The DESI end of year report.
And the end of year report is as of last fiscal year.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that would be like our.
These are kind of annually. They
Yeah.
always
Okay.
on this first meeting in October.
And then, the annual report. I think I think that's the Town of Milton annual report that includes like.
Just the departmental updates.
Yeah, the updates from Milton Public Schools portion of that report. That might be one that we have to actually vote to approve.
Feels early for that though, doesn't it?
Well, but it's going back to last year.
Yeah.
I don't know. You can double check
Well, I will
and let us
we'll
know.
double check that.
Okay.
That's what I'm suggesting. Double check.
All right. And just to let you all know, I asked Selena agreed to chair the meeting, to step up and do that because I'm going to have to be remote to the meeting because I'll be out of town, but able to join by Zoom. But I just figured I don't really want to be like the only person on Zoom trying to chair the meeting. So I plan to be here, but on Zoom. So Mark, you better get that worked out so that I'm able to log on. Thank you.
And not have an echo.
Okay. Anything else?
You've given him he's got quite a bit of tasks to figure out in the next 2 weeks.
Figure it out. The gym's in the back.
Okay. All right. Well.
I would just name Nick Milano. His wife is due on Monday.
Yep.
So, again, shout out. He
Yeah.
does a lot
Best
of work
wishes to the
help us.
Milanos.
It's very helpful for the MSBA. Continues to be so.
For sure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I want to say thank you and congratulations.
Yep.
Great.
First baby?
No, I think it's his third.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You said she's due?
I think it's a scheduled.
It's scheduled for
Oh.
Monday.
Yeah.
Okay.
But for next Monday.
So
Okay.
Yes, I understand.
Wow.
He wanted to go to Porch Fest, is what he said. So I made her schedule that. for Porch
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Everyone
yes,
going to
and
Porch Fest? Porch
yes,
Fest?
absolutely.
All right. It's 9:23 p.m. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor? All right. Thanks, everybody.
Awesome.
Good
Thank
night.
you.